Thank you much. I hope you all are recovered, had some coffee, and are fresh to go for the last three talks for this afternoon. As you said, I'm going to talk a bit more on the internal perspective of risk management and how you can leverage synergies. But before we get to that, just an introduction of BioNTech. I do suppose that most of you have heard about BioNTech. We were one of the few companies that supplied the COVID-19 vaccinations during the pandemic. But actually, sort of by our source, we are more R&D company who is focusing on cancer treatment by mRNA or proteins, but also, as you could have seen with COVID, and also other diseases. And one of our big visions is really to help mankind to maybe at some time in the future also have proper treatment and maybe get rid of cancer in the long run. We are a relatively small company. Before the COVID pandemic, the company was about 700 people, and then we were just growing like no tomorrow to basically nearly 7,000 last year, which was, as I said, because we needed to ramp up with getting the vaccinations going, distributing them worldwide, and so on. Still, our focus is on R&D, as I said, mainly on cancer oncology, but also on infectious diseases. We have, compared to a lot of other biotech and pharma companies, a lot of projects in our R&D pipeline, and this is still sort of our really main focus. As you can see, we have only one product currently on the market commercialized, which is the COVID-19 vaccination. We have different sites all over the world, mainly in Germany, but also in the States and in Asia, as well as in Africa. And we basically continue our journey and expanding over time. I'm here today with my colleague Daphne, and we're running together the enterprise risk management. So that's why also today I want to focus more on the internal perspective and not just on supply chain risk management. I want to talk a bit about synergies, and I'm sure one or the other of you also had run into similar problems and issues as we had it in the past, and I also had it with other companies, and here I just want to share a bit. So if you look at a company, and that can be from any sector basically, you have your company, you have it structured in your product, in your business segments, in your different functions, might it be R&D, procurement, finance, you name it. And you have a lot of different requirements out and about on risk management. It might be supply chain risk management, it might be quality risk management. So there are a lot of things were basically introduced over the decades. And as you could have seen earlier on, also regulations getting more and more and more that you need to implement. And what you could have seen over the last years is basically you have very well established risk management processes for the individual perspective. Let's say a very well established quality risk management, a very well established compliance management. So these are working fine. But one of the questions is, how do they interact with each other? And what happened quite often, especially in bigger companies with a lot of complexity, is that most of the time they're still working into silos. They have their regulations, they have their way of doing things, but this interaction with each other still at some times making issues. It can be fragmented governance, it can be different data and tools, and quite often, basically the people in operations who had to deliver to all these different risk management processes are the ones who suffer because they have like one event, one risk, and they have to report it to several people. And this is basically diluting down the power of risk management as such in a company. You might have blind spots, how you have interdependencies, you have duplication of efforts, and also your senior management and your management board might sometimes be confused if you come from different perspectives on an issue. And if you're unlucky, you might even have different assessments to that issue. So for one side, it might be fine and easy, all is going well, whereas for the other perspective, the world is going to end if you're not going to do anything about it. So it's basically no longer the risk management methodology, it's more how can you orchestrate this all together to also have a decent force to make things happening in the future. So if you really sort of turn that down into questions, it's no longer do we manage risks? It's really more on how can we connect these activities together, and also how can we achieve synergies. And there are basically three main points that we need to consider, and we also talked about this today. One is the processes, the data, and most importantly, people. If you then have a closer look on what are the different levers that you actually need to have a look on and you need to work on, you also can drill it down and to say, okay, we need to link our risk management processes together. We need to connect the data and the technologies, and we need to come together with these different risk management processes into one framework that you then have a decent risk management ecosystem in the end. And here I would like to drill down a bit in more detail, getting started with linking your risk management processes. So as I said, you have different processes, procurement, supply chain, quality, and they're still interacting with each other. And it also can happen that basically, as I said, they have different regulations, and here it's important that you first need to know what kind of risk management processes you have in your company. Which ones do you actually need? And this will differ from sector to sector. So example, we come from a biotech pharma sector, so we have also a lot of things in addition in terms of quality, very specific regulations, because patient safety is very important. Whereas I might go to another sector, you also have other specifics. Other risk management processes we have in common. Might it be, for example, employee safety? Yeah. So first, really get clarity. What are the requirements? What risk management processes do you need? And again, what is the audience you are talking about? And then try as much as you can. And this can be different, really difficult. How can you standardize in terms of your wording? And what can you align on as a minimal standard? You might have different regulations and they might have different requirements. And it can be even as, you might say, easy that the wording of your different risk management steps can differ depending which regulation you talk about. So it could be that you talk about risk response, about risk treatment, or risk mitigation. In the end, you talk about the same, but your regulation calls it differently. And if you then talk in your risk management community together, they talk about the same, but with different words, and this can already start the complexity where people are getting confused. So this is really sit down, what is the common standards you can agree on? How can you align on your wording together, basically? And also that you should take into consideration, you might have risk management processes in different maturity levels. You might have a risk management process that just has got started. They're happy if they can say, this risk is low, this is high, this is sort of medium. And you might have other risk management processes in your company that basically are way off with Monte Carlo simulations and have a lot of geeky fun. And it's also important to let them sort of be at their stage of maturity, because you cannot sort of expect from somebody who just got started to do high-end simulations. And you also don't want to track down the others down to very simple things. So you also, it's a lot of being aware to say, we try to standardize on common ground, but also let them be on the maturity level they are in. So this is basically try to map where your processes are, how they interact with each other, how they're connected, what the inputs, what are the outputs are. And of course, if you have some tools for them, the better. The other thing is really how can you connect the data together? This is a very, very schematic scheme. You have your different risk management processes, and as you again can see with your heat map, you might have different ways how you assess your risk. And again, for one perspective, the event, the risk you look at, it can be high. You look at it from another perspective, from another risk management process, and it might be low, it depending on your perspective. It could be, I have an issue, high impact on patient safety, low impact maybe financially, you don't know. So, but really be aware of these kind of things, that there are differences. And again, try to harmonize here, that maybe you at least can harmonize on a risk identifier, that if you talk about a case you have an alignment what you are talking about, and people not getting confused that in the end you might talk about the issue, but you have several different topics and documentations out and about there. The other is, if you can really manage, try to unify as much as you can. And again, it depends on the sector you are in. It depends on the risk management processes you have. You either can see, can I have a unified scoring? What is high, medium, low for me? Have a complex matrix on that. But again, it could be that it's not working depending where you are as a company. Or you can try to have a transfer matrix. So it's basically, as you can see here on the right-hand bottom corner, where you say, okay, I have a risk assessed in one of my processes, depicted as one of these heat maps here. But if I need to transfer it to, let's say, a common aligned, normalized risk management matrix, how would that look like? Because again, the criticality could be different. But also I need to say, you really need to discuss it with the other risk management experts if that is actually feasible for your company. It also could be that in the end, it's so complex that you need to sit together and need to talk about it. There are sometimes ways where you can automate that to shuffle it from one risk management system to the other, but sometimes you can't. And I think it's important that you are aware of that and that you don't force on things and try to automate or harmonize or have transfer matrices for everything, and it might not work. So it's really sit together, talk about it, and be open and consider the different needs and restrictions all these different processes have, basically. If you can, and again, this might be something on regulations or confidentiality, try to have a combined risk register. It can be, and we have that quite often with legal risks, that they are highly confidential or privileged, that they need to be in a secluded area where not a lot of people can see it. Again, have a look for your specific company. And then sort of for the next top one is how can you build the framework? You need to have clear roles and responsibilities, especially when you cross over different risk management processes. And one thing that I was also discussed in the morning, you need to have clear ownership. Who is owning the risk? Who is responsible for it? That you can do something about it. It might be when there are cross-functional risk that you need a second support here to say, okay, this might be mainly that person. He is the risk owner, but they need support from another function unit, business unit, you name it. But ownership and clear, roles and responsibilities are key. Otherwise, it usually gets chaotic. People might not take on their role, and it's just dragging on. So get that down. Try really also to get buy-in from your senior management, from your management board. What are the roles and responsibilities, and who has ownership of what? Especially, sorry, it's really dry here. Especially if it's about critical risks that really endanger the company. The other thing is, and it's again about people, how can you sort of bind the different stakeholders in, try to have cross-functional risk committees, that you have the experts from procurement, from quality, that do their processes together and can basically align together on issues that might have been found. Is that a risk? For whom is it a risk? How can we also communicate this in the organization? How can we escalate it to senior management or to other companies, departments, you name it? And because you might have that quite often are cross-cutting risk. You have a risk that's important for one risk management process, but also for others. And again, here, is it possible to have a joint scenario? What does that actually mean, that risk? What impact, what effect do you have that you can describe it on a supply chain level? What does it for procurement? What it is financially? What it is for quality? You might have those different aspects there, but that you can consider them together. And to have joint KPIs and also key risk indicators to see where is that whole alignment going in the long run. So with that, you basically would have one ecosystem. And I need to point out, it's really important that you are aware you have your different risk management processes, but don't enforce them to work all together and be all the same. Try to have like an umbrella which usually is done as enterprise risk management, so that you can align on these common grounds, but also leave them certain freedom. That you basically have the specialization of the processes still for them. Thank you very much. That you still keep their specializations in that bigger umbrella together. And while having that together, you can also streamline this interaction, this communication together. Also to have this awareness that each process is important, but they need to interact with each other. And also, as we had this morning, to be also aware that maybe for your company, one of these processes is more important than the other one. Might not be nice for one of them, but this is also to be aware of that and to phase it in. If you have that, if you really achieve to have a common risk language, your risk data together, combined together, have governance together, and also a backbone in terms of your data, that you then also have a stronger point for you as a company and as risk managers for your strategy, for your management board, that this also helps better for your decision making. So, and last, I just want to give you a bit of a roadmap basically on how you can implement it. And again, it depends on your company and your different ways of regulations. So if you start, first map out your processes. What do you have there? Identify the overlaps. Where can we sort of have a common ground? Where don't we have a common ground? Then say, what is the standardization we all can agree on, and then that's actually feasible for us as a company? How far can we go? The more you can standardize, the more you have common ground, the better, but you will find a way and a point where you basically know, okay, we can't go further than that because here we have our different regulations, and this is where I cannot sort of take the others with me because I'm getting too much into my regulation here where the others cannot follow. So this is important. Keep your committees, that you can keep your alignment to talk about these kind of things, and then start a pilot. And what I would recommend is really take a pilot where you choose 1 or 2 cross-cutting risks. If you start off the best, maybe with just a few of your other risk management processes, don't go for all of them at once. Maybe pick ones which are already close, which are already a certain set of maturity, that you can work specifically on this cross-cutting and on this collaboration and working together. And once this is done, try to extend your pilot bit by bit. It's not try to run for the thing sort of 120% at the start. Go bit by bit to implement it, and then over time refine basically. So with that, I come to my end. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to later on.